Today, when you hear the name Elon Musk, the images are just instant. Obviously the future, right. Massive rockets, tunnels under cities, global networks, and, above all, this staggering wealth and raw power.
That's the result, though. That's the consequence of decades of work. But the sources we've gathered for you today, they zoom in on a dramatically different moment in time.
Yeah.
We're talking about the life of Elon Musk at age 25. He was nowhere near that level of certainty or, success.
Not even close. I mean, if you really look at the material detailing his life in that era, you realize he was far, far closer to total, absolute failure than to the global influence he has now.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to take a deep dive into that foundational mindset, the struggles, the immediate choices, and frankly, the profound lack of glamour that defined him before the world started paying attention.
And this period is just so crucial for understanding how capacity is built. It's not about the moment the rocket launches. It's about the years of obscurity, spent in the engine room. We are looking for the original blueprints of his operational drive before all the money and fame complicated the picture.
And what we found buried in these sources is, well, it's astonishing. We're talking about a man who is accepted to Stanford, the dream school, and quits after just 2 days.
2 days. It's incredible.
We'll discuss why the sources describe years where he literally slept under his desk. But maybe the most counterintuitive detail is the psychological core of it all. What truly motivated him wasn't the pursuit of success. And surprisingly, his deepest fear wasn't failure at all.
To understand that intensity, that drive, you have to start with one simple fact. He was, above all, an outsider.
Absolutely. The narrative often jumps straight to, Zip2 or PayPal, but the background is what defines the pressure he was under. At 25, he wasn't some prodigy born into Silicon Valley wealth.
Not at all. He wasn't connected to the tech establishment. He was an immigrant who had been dealing with this tremendous personal dislocation for years.
And he was so young when it started.
Well, one biography we reviewed details this profound sense of being displaced. He left South Africa at 17 because he just felt trapped, not just physically, but intellectually. He bounced from Canada to the U.S., and by 25, he was still trying to belong.
And he had nothing to fall back on.
Nothing. He had built a life with, and this is a quote, no safety net, no powerful family, and critically, no shortcuts. The sources describe him as quiet, awkward, and just profoundly focused.
The kind of person who gets overlooked.
Yeah, the kind of person you'd overlook because he was just buried in books and ideas.
And I love that one detail the authors emphasized. He sometimes read so much he would genuinely forget to eat. That isn't just a love of books.
Yeah.
That's an intensity of focus that borders on, physical self-neglect, all for intellectual curiosity.
That intellectual curiosity was his only real asset. He didn't have the traditional resources, so he had to rely on this fundamental first principles thinking, which is where his educational choices become so key. He chose to double major in physics and economics.
Right. And most people chase degrees that promise a clear, immediate ROI, a defined career path. But he specifically went for the fundamentals. Why did the sources spend so much time analyzing that choice?
Because it reveals everything about his way of thinking. He wasn't just collecting qualifications, he was building a cognitive framework. He chose physics because, in his own words from around that time, physics tells you what's possible.
What's possible?
And economics taught him how systems work, how decisions flow. He wasn't looking for a job. He was arming himself with the deepest possible understanding of the universe and human incentives. That intellectual rigor, the sources suggest, became his customized safety net. It replaced the one he lacked emotionally and financially.
So he has this powerful but, socially awkward intellectual foundation. He's figured out what's possible, but then he makes this truly radical pivot. He gets accepted into Stanford.
The ultimate validation.
The pinnacle of the academic journey,
Right.
To pursue energy physics. And he quits after 2 days.
2 days. Just imagine the weight of that decision. For any young person, getting into Stanford is a monumental achievement. It's a guarantee of future security, of status.
And he just walks away.
Immediately, he walked away from it. Why? Because the internet boom was happening right then, in real time.
And the sources convey this sense of almost panic, not about failing the program, but about missing the window.
Precisely. He felt time slipping away. His analysis was cold and rational. Academia was just too slow. It couldn't address the immediate foundational problems of the internet. That decision quitting Stanford is the first true test of his core principle.
The willingness to choose uncertainty.
The willingness to choose immediate, raw uncertainty over guaranteed security. The biography authors point out that very few people, no matter how ambitious, would abandon that level of stability.
And that uncertainty wasn't just some abstract idea. It immediately translated into the visceral reality of his first company, Zip2. We hear the myths, but the reality for Zip2 is one of sustained, intense deprivation.
Oh, it was not the storybook start. Zip2 was an online directory for newspapers, which seems so mundane now. But back then, they were selling this idea to skeptical, established media companies.
So the money wasn't flowing in.
The financial margins were razor thin. For years, we really need to emphasize the physical reality of that grind because it separates him from so many later founders who had venture capital and comfortable apartments from day one.
So paint that picture for us. What was the daily routine that the sources describe?
Well, he and his brother couldn't afford an apartment. And this wasn't for a month or two. This was the baseline for years. He slept on a beanbag under his desk.
Under his desk?
In a tiny rented office space. Probably stale, often empty, except for him coding late at night. The lack of income meant he had no money for essentials. So to shower, he would walk to the local YMCA every morning.
You're describing a profound lack of comfort. It's actually hard to imagine operating at an elite intellectual level while you're constantly worried about where to sleep or shower.
It shows an incredible tolerance for discomfort. He was spending all his energy not on managing some lifestyle, but on coding and selling. He once said it directly, "I didn't have money for rent, so I slept in the office."
Right.
And the sources argue this was key because it built mental resilience. When later failures happened, and they definitely happened, he knew, fundamentally, that he could survive without luxury.
But wait, a skeptic might ask, isn't that just bad planning? Why do the sources frame that as a virtue instead of just recklessness?
That's a fair question. The material suggests it was less about recklessness and more about maximizing output. Every single dollar saved on rent was a dollar that could be poured back into the server or the company.
So as a strategy.
It was a ruthless optimization strategy. The deprivation wasn't a romantic affectation. The authors distilled this period down to 3 simple components. Not balance, not wellness, just focus. That sustained focus is what created the immense capacity we see today.
That focus naturally brings us to the next phase, what you could call the architecture of his obsession. Even in this early environment, where the stakes were just survival, the sources note he was already acquiring a difficult reputation.
Yes. The biographies from that era, they don't sugarcoat it at all. He was intense, demanding, blunt to the point of being rude.
Inflexible.
Absolutely inflexible regarding quality and deadlines. This made him difficult to work with for both employees and his co-founders.
So this raises a really important question. Was this just ego, or was it pure mission-driven obsession?
The material suggests a vital distinction. It wasn't about inflating his own status. It was a non-negotiable drive toward the objective. He wasn't trying to be liked. Frankly, he didn't appear to care about conventional social grazes at all.
Just the goal.
Just the goal. He was so intensely focused on building something that mattered, and if you weren't equally focused, his bluntness would surface. That obsession was the engine.
And that engine reveals itself perfectly when Zip2 finally sells in 1999. He becomes a multimillionaire in his late 20s. A normal person takes a long break.
A very long break. Travel the world, reconnect with family, pay yourself back for the years of deprivation.
But he did something totally different.
He didn't slow down for even a week. The goal had never been the money, and the acquisition proved it. He immediately pivoted his wealth into fuel for his next ambition, which became X.com, later PayPal. He didn't enjoy comfort. He didn't even pause to reflect.
That's a powerful insight. He saw wealth not as a finish line, but purely as banked capacity for the next bigger problem.
Exactly. Instead of asking, how do I relax?
Right.
He immediately asked the ultimate next level question. And he posed it to himself while he was still covered in the dust of the last venture. What problem is big enough to spend my life on?
Wow.
That shows his core motivation was mission-oriented, not financially driven, long before he was famous.
Now, let's talk about the psychological core that allowed all this quitting Stanford, the years on the floor. It relates to fear. The sources reveal that the common fear of, failing a startup or losing his money, that was not what guided him.
And this is maybe the most defining psychological detail of his early 20s. Fear of failure paralyzes most people. It keeps us in safe jobs and comfortable routines.
Sure.
For Musk, failure was just data. It was a temporary state. His primary guiding existential fear was far more unusual.
And that fear was waking up one day and realizing I didn't try.
That is the fear of regret. It's an active motivator, not a passive inhibitor. If your core fear is not trying, then every day you aren't relentlessly pursuing the biggest possible problem, you are failing yourself.
So that internal compass just compelled him.
It compelled him to choose the path of uncertainty and to tolerate immense physical and emotional discomfort. It guided every risk assessment he made at 25. He was optimizing his life to minimize the chances of future regret.
And the sources do touch on the cost of this level of focus. This is where the human element really comes in.
Yes, that relentless focus came with a heavy personal price tag. Work was always primary. This singular commitment made his personal life intense, demanding, and incredibly difficult for those around him.
Right.
The cost was paid in emotional capital, and the sources make it clear that this pursuit of the mission put incredible strain on his early relationships. He was willing to pay that price for capacity.
Which brings us directly to the real lesson here. When we look back at Musk at 25, the material suggests he wasn't primarily building companies. Zip2 was the result. What he was truly constructing was his own internal infrastructure.
He was building capacity.
Exactly. He was building capacity.
And if we break down what capacity meant in practical terms, the authors note several specific areas. He was building the capacity to work longer than anyone else, the capacity to think deeper, to operate from first principles.
The mental side of it.
The capacity to tolerate chronic loneliness in the office at 2 a.m. And critically, the capacity to tolerate being misunderstood, judged, and dismissed by everyone who wasn't sharing that intense grind.
So he wasn't waiting for the world to validate his idea or his worth. He was using those years of struggle to pre-validate his own resilience.
That's it. That foundational time was about maximizing his personal ability to execute, rather than his current comfort or bank account. And the final major learning point from the material is this. He didn't wait for readiness. He didn't wait for confidence. And he certainly didn't wait for permission.
He moved with clarity, not comfort.
Clarity, not comfort.
That is such a massive distinction for anyone trying to achieve ambitious goals. Most of us wait until we feel perfectly secure financially or emotionally before we jump into a difficult project. We wait for comfort.
But the sources show the security was irrelevant to him. The clarity of his mission finding and solving a problem worth his life was always greater than his need for immediate security. That clarity allowed him to ignore the chaos of his present circumstances.
So the central conclusion from this deep dive is pretty clear. At 25, he wasn't powerful, he wasn't rich, and outside his small circle, he certainly wasn't respected. But he had something far rarer.
Something the sources call a long-term mind in a short-term world.
A long-term mind in a short-term world.
He was playing a game of decades while everyone around him was focused on the next quarter or the next promotion. And that clarity of long-term vision is precisely what allowed him to endure years of showering at the YMCA.
And that connects directly back to you, the listener, navigating your own journey. Most people look at the finished product of success and ask the standard question, how do I become successful?
Right.
Musk, at 25, before anyone was watching or caring, asked that defining, deeper question. What problem is worth my life?
And the transformation from that broke outsider sleeping under a desk to the builder of the modern aerospace and EV industries was fueled entirely by that focused question and a willingness to tolerate extreme difficulty in service of a long-term goal.
So here's the final thought for you to mull over as you transition back into your day. If the capacity to handle truly vast challenges later in life is built through early struggle and loneliness, what small area of acute discomfort are you currently tolerating? Whether it's long hours, difficult learning, or being misunderstood. What are you tolerating that is unknowingly building your crucial long-term capacity? Think about that price and what you're getting in return.